right, well, we'll go ahead and kick things off. For those of you who have joined us before, again, welcome back to another webinar. For those of you who have been here before, this is all about education, trying to get as much information out in front of landowners as we possibly can. And today, I'm privileged to present to you probably the most horsepower we've ever had on any of these webinars. The two gentlemen that we have here, we've got Max and Zach with NCX. And these guys probably have forgotten more about trees in the last couple weeks than I'll ever know about trees. So if you have ever had a question about foliage on your property, trees, what you can do with those, how they can potentially generate some revenue for you, these are probably the two best guys you could possibly talk to about that. So really exciting to have both of you guys on. Max, you've done several with us in the past, but we get Zach this time. This is going to be really good. So like all of our other webinars, we try to make these as interactive as possible. If you have questions throughout the presentation, Max and Zach are going to go through some slides. They're going to go through a demo. At any time, feel free to ask questions. And again, leverage the time you have with them. This is, like I said, a very highly capable forestry team that you have in front of you today. I'm not including myself with that, but Max and Zach are your guys to talk to about that. So again, just some house cleaning here. This is being recorded, so we will be sending out a recording of this webinar. And also we'll provide, Max and Zach will be providing those slides. We'll send those out as well. So everything you see here, it's going to be recorded. You can come back and watch it later if you'd like. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. What we like to do when we start all of these webinars is, if you want to go ahead and in the chat or the discussion here, if you want to just go ahead and drop in there where you're calling from, that can sometimes help the folks that are presenting here to talk about specifically, when we're talking about trees and things like that, guys, it's kind of specific of what kind of programs they can do and the types of revenue based on where they're at in the country. So that's usually helpful to kind of get an understanding of where the people are at. This is a nationwide webinar, so there's people from all over the place. So feel free to go ahead and drop that in there, and we can kind of narrow that scope down a little bit. Before we get in the NCX, I'll do a quick presentation here about LandApp and what we do here at LandGate. So let me go ahead and share my screen. This. So LandApp is an online platform. It's a completely kind of new idea in the whole marketplace real estate world, where we provide an enormous amount of information across the country, and we have an app. You can go to the Google Store, the Apple Store, and you can research LandApp, and you can get access to every single parcel across the United States for $6 a month, and you can get ownership information with that. You can get a bunch of different information there, and you can get that all on your phone. So you can see here as I zoom in, you're going to get parcels loading here, and I can find out who owns what. And what's really interesting is we've aggregated an enormous amount of data into this platform where I can go ahead and click this data layer, and all of these different types of resources you have for your property, we're going to feed you back a bunch of data and information. So you can go ahead and get information about solar potential on your property, trees, topography, basic land use information. And this changes significantly, right? Depending on where you're at in the country, each data type that you're going to look at is going to be significantly different. But with your $6 a month subscription to LandApp, you can get access to all of these things, and you can start digging in really in depth, all types of different information, soil types, building suitability, depth to bedrock, farmland classification, a bunch of different information. Some of the folks that live more on the outskirts of towns and things like that, you can get some information about contamination. This will include underground storage tanks, abandoned oil wells, toxic spills, all types of different things to get some information about your property. What's really nice is we go ahead and aggregate all of this information by just clicking on a piece of property. It's going to go ahead and give you a 0 to 100 index score of what the potential value is on that property. So there's all of your different potential values if you want to understand what it's good for solar, wind, data centers, battery storage, mineral rights, all of those things. But then it's also really nice because you can get an understanding of the risks. These are all proprietary to LandGate. We generate these all, or LandApp and LandGate. We generate these ourselves, but you get a really nice understanding of what is going on each one of these properties by just clicking on it. And again, you get that nationwide for $6 a month. When you find something you like or you want to do a report on your own property, it's really, really easy to generate these reports on the fly. With your $6 a month subscription, this is an example of what one of these looks like. You can go ahead and generate these, as many of these as you want, but this will give a really nice summary of the property you're looking at, index scores, and then some really granular information about the property itself. And for those that are in the real estate industry that are watching, you can kind of white label this report and you can make it your own. So if I'm a RE/MAX agent and I want to go ahead and send a property report or to a potential buyer, or I'm trying to pitch that person to go ahead and get their listing, I can go ahead and white label this, and I can put my own logo in there. I can put a photo of myself. I can put my information on here, and boom, it is it's now my report. I can include any of these segments that I want, not include them, but it's a really, really nice way to put together some information to send out to clients and potential clients. Or if you're a landowner yourself, you can start digging into your own properties you want to buy, properties you might be managing, things like that, and get a really good understanding of the different aspects of those properties. So without further delay, we are here today again with all these tabs. Stop sharing. We are here to talk about trees and carbon credits with Max and Zach. And guys, I was going to do an introduction for both of you guys, but I don't think I would do it justice. So apologize. I'd like you guys to both introduce yourselves. And I know you're both very humble guys, but I would like you to, touch a little bit on your background about, the education, the experience you guys have with carbon credits, forest carbon credits specifically, just so the folks on the call can realize really the folks they have in front of them here. So without further delay, we're going to go ahead and kick it over to you guys. And like I said, let the folks know exactly your backgrounds here, because I think it's very powerful.
A great one. And thank you, Craig, for the very kind introductions. And thanks, everybody, for showing up on this call. So we got people from all over the country, from Wisconsin down to Louisiana. Actually, Keith, I'm going to be in Baton Rouge this Saturday, just by coincidence. And so if you've got some Baton Rouge dining recommendations, I'm all ears. But I'm Max Nova, and we also have Zach Paraso, who's my co-founder here at NCX. NCX stands for the Natural Capital Exchange. And for the last 15 years, we've been working with landowners all across the country to help them optimize the value of their properties, with a focus on forested properties in particular. And so, like Craig said, today we'll be thinking a lot about things like timber, about carbon, trying to figure out what are these things worth, what are some of the trade-offs that you face as a landowner, how did the decisions that you make today change the future trajectory of your forest, the cash flows on that, and then the other values that you might care about on your property. And so, Zach, you want to do a quick intro, and then we'll get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Zach Parasa. I am one of the co-founders of NCX, and my background's forestry. So for the last 15 years, like Max has said, we've worked with lots and lots of landowners, some of the biggest landowners in the US, helping them with analytics for their property, and all the way down to to landowners with 5 acres. And like Craig mentioned, we've worked with carbon markets really. I mean, over the last 12 years, seen them as they've developed, as they've changed. We helped landowners develop carbon credits of their own, landowners of all sizes, up until just a couple of years ago, and excited to focus on helping landowners look at all opportunities, look at the economic and ecological outcomes that they could expect, and eager to show you some of the stuff we've been working on today to help address some of the questions we've heard from so many landowners as we've worked with folks from across the country. So with that, I think, Max, you're going to go first and share some stuff, right?
Yep. Here, let me pull this on up and we'll get this show on the road. So, okay, great. So this should be coming through. So today we're going to talk about what your woods are worth. And like Craig showed earlier with LandGate and the LandApp, right? That's like a great way to get sort of a high-level overview of the opportunities that you have on your property. At NCX, we're very focused on forests and timberland. And so I wanted to share with you some tools that we've been building to help landowners dig even deeper in these areas on your property. And like I said, NCX stands for the Natural Capital Exchange, and we're really built around this idea that your land isn't just a wall of green. You know, those trees out there provide all sorts of values, from timber to wildlife habitat to recreation opportunities to carbon storage and water. But then you also have things like fire risk or pest risk, right? There's a lot of things that are happening on your land. And our mission at NCX is to give landowners a really comprehensive view of this on your forested property and help you manage your land with confidence and understand, you know, are the opportunities that you see in front of you, like somebody knocks on your door to buy your timber, what's a good price? Or you hear about carbon programs, like, well, what is a good price for my carbon, for my property? How do I navigate some of the trade-offs between all of these things? Because every action that you take on your property affects all of these different aspects of your land. And so we're really excited today to talk about a forest forecast tool that we've built to give every landowner in the US access to this kind of information. And Zach will do a demo of that here in a minute. One of the big questions that a lot of landowners today face is this timber versus carbon trade-off. And ultimately it boils down to a question of, do I let my trees grow or do I cut them down? And should I do that now? Should I do that later? How can I think about these different management pathways in front of me? Because there are two very different revenue streams. A lot of the timber stuff is like, you do a timber harvest, you get a big check up front, but then, you know, you've got decades as your trees regrow. Whereas carbon programs typically give you a much smaller payment, but you maybe get that every year for some longer period of time, and you still have the trees on your property. So there's different time horizons, there's different payment structure, different risk associated with all of these things. And to make an informed decision about this, you need to know these things. And so that's why we're excited today to talk about a new tool that we actually just released to landowners in the Southeast earlier this week, called Forest Forecast, which for your property will show you how different types of natural capital on your property can evolve depending on what your goals and management plan for that property look like, whether that's the cash flow from timber revenue or making really great deer habitat. And so Zach will pull up a live demo here and walk us through how you can use this on your property to evaluate questions like, you know, should I sell my carbon or should I do a timber harvest? So I'll stop sharing, and Zach, over to you.
Perfect. All right, let's see if we can do this here. All right, am I coming through?
Yep, gotcha.
Good deal. Okay, so like Max said, when we were working with landowners, I mean, tens of thousands of landowners to evaluate carbon projects, one of the biggest challenges for them was to understand what they might be giving up, what they were actually selling when they worked with a forest carbon program. And the right way to think about it is that you're selling your harvest rights for a pretty long period of time, usually something like 20 or 40 years. And as Max said, many landowners, you know, you're looking for sometimes revenue, sometimes you're looking to improve wildlife habitat, and a harvest decision isn't necessarily just binary. It's not just cut or let your forest grow. There's also there's different intensities of cutting your forest that can improve long-term value, that can provide more or less upfront revenue, and that can affect wildlife habitat, such as, like, if you're out in the West, like elk, or down in the Southeast, which is what we're going to be showing a demo from, white-tailed deer and turkey. And what we heard from a lot of landowners is that those were the things that they cared about most. Those were some of the driving reasons for why they owned the property. Oftentimes it was long-term value of the property or legacy. It was hunting opportunities for them and for their family, or it was to, you know, they were seeking revenue-generating opportunities to help pay the cost of the land so that they could enjoy it and not go in the hole. And so working with NCX is really simple, and working with this tool is really simple. You can go to our website, ncx.com, and you can make an account in a couple of clicks. You can point out your property, and we're going to, sort of behind the scenes run a deep analysis on a whole bunch of data, some that we've generated over the last decade from our experience working with institutional forest landowners, those very sophisticated landowners. And yeah, so we're crunching the numbers and we're assessing what property, like what's on your property. We're looking not just as one monolithic forest, but different management units or ecological units that you have that might be different and that might benefit from different management styles. So we're crunching the numbers behind the scenes, and all that we ask that that you tell us is what it is that you want to happen on your land. What do you value most? What is it you're trying to achieve? And so from the moment you get in, you're going to see this. What is your standing timber value? Most landowners don't know this, and it's actually usually pretty expensive to find out. We're leveraging remotely sensed information to give you a rough estimate. You could almost think of this as like a, Redfin or Zillow Zestimate for your house. This is for your timber. So here it is. Here's one property in the U.S. South. This person has $47,000 of standing timber value today. Their deer score, so we score that out of 10, is a 5.9, and their turkey is a 5.3, so about average. So for this landowner, let's do something pretty typical. We'll say that they would like some revenue, and maybe they'd like to balance that with deer habitat. With this system as we have it right now, you can pick up to 2 of these combined, and it'll balance those. So you could have just as easily picked long-term revenue or timber revenue. So you want, you'd like to make some money now, maybe pay off the taxes or pay off a little bit of that initial cost of perhaps purchasing the land. But you also want to manage for that long-term legacy value. Or perhaps you're all in on wildlife and you want turkey and deer. But just for fun, we'll go with what we see a lot of folks choose, which is revenue and deer habitat. And luckily those often go hand in hand. And so we're going to click Show Me My Forecast. And behind the scenes, we're looking at thousands of scenarios, of different management scenarios that you could have run on all of the different management units we've identified on your property. And we're looking for the right combination that's going to provide, in this case, an increase in deer habitat over a 30-year time horizon and revenue that you can make. And we use something called like net present value, or sort of the time adjusted revenue. So we're looking at, we know most people want revenue earlier on, but that has to be balanced with making sure you can kind of maximize what you get. So for this landowner, and we can see what they have up top, we can see what goals they've selected. We see that if they manage in sort of the optimal way for these goals, there are a couple of things that happen. One is they can dramatically increase their deer habitat. See this gray line on the bottom, this baseline? That's what would happen if they just let their forest grow. Just for the next 30 years, they kind of stood back and said, I bet the best thing would be to grow this. It turns out it's not. It turns out that actually maybe active management is going to be better from a deer habitat standpoint. And we'll look at what those management recommendations are here in a second. But we also see that there's an awful lot of money to be made for this landowner if they take some actions now to prepare their forest, to grow it out further, and then sort of harvest later on and get quite a bit more revenue than what the current standing value of their timber is. What we see from this property is that it's a pretty young forest, and that by going in, and we have these recommended actions. These are what we like for this scenario, what the landowner would need to do over the next 5 years to achieve these outcomes, these things that they've said are most important to them. And what those are thinning. So it's not cutting all of the trees. It's going in and actually cutting out some of the trees that are choking out growth of your bigger, more valuable trees. It's making more growing space open for those trees, which simultaneously, in this case, opens up opens up the canopy and allows light to come down to the forest floor and for smaller plants to grow, which is what deer and turkey often eat. And that's why we see the deer habitat improving right off the bat with those thinnings. Now you see you're not making a whole lot of money with those early thinnings, but they cover their costs. So this landowner, by conducting a thinning, cutting just a few, some of those trees, they're making a little bit of money and they're dramatically increasing their deer habitat. And that's on a pretty large swath of their property, 292 acres.
Real quick, I want to double check on that because
Please.
for a lot of landowners out there that what you just said there doesn't make a lot of intuitive sense, right? What you're saying is if you apply some management practices, then you can actually increase the health and the productivity of basically everything with their tree stand, versus what some might have the idea is like, I want this to be the best nature preserve. I want to see as much deer and turkey as I possibly want. I'm not going to touch it because nature can do better than I can. And the science of it, right? And that's where you know very well, that thought is not actually true, right? It actually coming in and thinning and and you touch on this, is kind of acting the way that nature would if we would let it run its course of small brush fires coming through and things like that actually makes the forest healthier. Can you touch on that really quick?
No, you're absolutely right. That's one of the biggest surprises that we see from, or that we hear from landowners when we review some of these results with them. Not every wildlife species benefits from more open forest conditions, but many of them do. And most of them benefit certainly from more complex forest conditions, meaning some openings, some more dense areas across, either an ownership or across your and your neighbor's ownership, because oftentimes they don't really respect the fence lines. But for these game species, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Trees themselves are sort of locked in competition. They're all fighting for resources, for water, for nutrients, and for light. And what thinning does, what some of these harvest operations do, is they kind of take out those, the poor competitors, the ones that are kind of choking things out, but not actually adding value, dollar value to your forest. And the way to think about it is, whatever acreage you have, there's kind of a top limit on how much growth every year is happening on every acre. The question is, where is that growth going to go? Is it going to go to your big valuable trees, or is it going to lots of small trees? So growth is going to happen every year, but by thinning, in this case, for this landowner, they're going to dramatically increase the rate of value accrual, the rate of sort of dollars that are stacking up in those trees on their property. And like you're saying, Craig, for these game species that benefit from more open conditions, you're improving that habitat. All of this would happen over a long period of time, but by doing this those trees would compete with each other. Some of them would die naturally, but by doing this, you're sort of accelerating that natural process, just like with a fire, or just like with, if some insects had come through and took out the weaker trees. And so that's what's happening. And that's what we want landowners to be able to see with this tool, to be able to say, this is what matters to me. Now, what is the best thing for me to do? And what I want you to know about this tool is, it's not a super prescriptive description for the landowner. We're saying thin, right? For these lots of stands. But what we want you to do is, if when you see this, you recognize, yes, I need to be active in my management to achieve my goals, then at that point, that's when you want to talk with a professional that can really help dial this in and make sure that we're fully understanding the nuance of what it is that you're trying to achieve beyond just, two goals, and to connect you with a professional to get this done. Because what we've found is that landowners, like Max said, they look at their forest and it just feels like a wall of green. And they assume that either cutting everything today is going to make them the most money, or that just being hands-off is going to get them the wildlife outcomes that they want. And it's not usually that simple. And they struggle to get help, and they struggle to get very, very directed help. And so this is the easy button for you in your forest. You click this button, you're going to be talking with an expert who can help direct you and help sort of guide that process to help you make the right decision for your land and your goals, and then to actually execute that on the property. So that's why we're so excited to release this, to get this in front of folks. So let's see. I guess Max, anything?
One thing in here about the wall of green that I think is actually really nice about this tool that we've put together is, you can see the baseline in that, like, deer habitat quality, right? That dotted gray line, that does not stay the same over the course, even if you're not doing anything, right? That number changes over time. Your forest is not a static thing. Like Zach says, growth is happening on your forest every single year. And the impactful thing that you can do as a landowner is shape, like, well, where does that growth happen? Is that in the, is that happening in big diameter stuff and small trees? Does that help me achieve more of the things that I want on my property? And we're hoping that a tool like this makes it easy for you to at least take some of those first steps, right? And understand directionally, like, oh, actually, maybe I do need to be doing more active management, or actually maybe just letting stuff grow is the way to achieve what I want on my property. But anyway, so this is like I said, a pretty fresh off the presses, or hot off the presses release from NCX. We'll be building this tool out over time, but we really hope that this is a way for many landowners across the country to get started with more active forest management. Like Zach said, there's a button at the bottom there that you can click and talk to a forestry expert here at NCX, and we can make sure that you're sort of pointed in the right direction on all that, and help you find trusted local partners to actually do things like thinnings and timber harvests and management like that. Well, great. So Zach, if you maybe stop sharing your screen, I can go back to the deck. Do we have any questions that have come in the meantime? No, we got some great Baton Rouge restaurant recommendations though. So
yeah, it doesn't look like any questions yet, but guys, very impressive, very, very cool. Just for everybody listening, I have my pulse on a lot of the technology that's being rolled out for landowners across the United States. That is by far the most granular thing that I have ever seen to give you insights on your property. So just like you guys said, you go to ncx.com. I can go, just for the process for everybody listening, I go to ncx.com, guys. I type in my address, or I use the map and I click on a piece of property, and it's going to show me. And I think, again, not to beat a dead horse here, that dotted line that you guys were showing there, that's the baseline. That's as if I'm not going to do anything on my property. I live in the Black Forest, the western part of the western, it's fairly dry, but we have pine forests and stuff here. But if I don't do anything, that's that dotted line, right? And then your software allows me to go in there. If I like looking at the deer, the turkeys, or elk, or whatever it is, and I want to encourage that over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, your software automatically goes in, takes the technical data, chews through it as if I'm a scientist. I don't have to be, because I have your software, right? I can click on it and I can get that input, and I can get an understanding of where my property could be if that's part of my goals. Am I understanding that right, guys?
That's exactly right. And
awesome.
Yep. And like you said, it's like we're trying to do a lot of the legwork here in terms of the data analysis and the bookkeeping and all that, to make it as accessible as possible for landowners all over the country, where you don't have to be a scientist to do this, but that you can benefit from a lot of the great science that has been done for forests across the country. This is an example of a Fish and Wildlife Service technical document about deer habitat. And these are the sort of things that behind the scenes, our team is going through all of these, scientific publications and using that to do things like create what that deer habitat metric might look like. And over the coming months, we'll be adding more and more of these, what we think of as your natural capital portfolio, sort of stock tickers for all of these different components of your natural capital portfolio on your property. And you can understand how the decisions that you make today shape how these, how your natural capital portfolio will grow or get into trouble over time based on the actions that you take today. And like Zach said, a lot of what we're trying to achieve is help every landowner become more engaged with their forest management. This tool is free for all landowners. We actually got a grant from the Forest Service to help support building this tool, and it's really about this sort of learn, decide, act journey for many landowners, where you learn what's possible on your property, you decide the path that you want to take, and then there's that easy button that Zach showed you, where we can help you take that next step and actually act on this and help actually take those management actions on your property with trusted local service providers. And with that, that's the presentation. So happy to have conversations about the tool, about forestry in general, about thinking about carbon markets or timber or lots of things that we could talk about. So I'll maybe stop sharing my screen here and let's open it up for some questions.
It looks like we've got a couple that came in here, guys. We'll go ahead and start with Bond. And I think Bond was in our last one as well. So Bond, great to see you back again. Thanks for always engaging. He says he's got a fair amount of invasive species and what he kind of trash vegetation. How does that factor in with you guys when you click on it and it runs through your algorithm and it's finding all this data? Is that factored in, or how does that work, guys?
It is, yeah. So we're evaluating the structure and composition of forest on every acre of your property as the starting conditions. So things like invasive species and like the size of trees that you have on each acre are absolutely taken into account. And in many cases, that's what shows up as being one of the priorities for landowners right off the bat, is going in and thinning out or removing some of those invasive species so that they're not sapping up that growth that you could otherwise, be going to valuable species, whether it's valuable for wildlife, like oak trees for acorns, for deer in this case, or value for dollars, which oak trees are valuable for that too. So short answer is yes. We're taking all of that information into account to kind of deliver the best scenarios for you.
One other,
go ahead, Max.
Yeah, one other sort of thing to know about, especially for invasives, is there's a whole other part of NCX that we haven't talked so much about. That's all the programs that are available to you as a landowner. And so we automatically assess your eligibility based on your property details and some other sort of information that we collect in the onboarding process for NCX, of all the private carbon programs and stuff that you're eligible for, but also all the public programs. And there's a lot of money through the NRCS to do things like invasives management, and there's a bit of a process, right? Because it is a government program and stuff, but that's and we haven't yet integrated that into this forest forecast tool that you saw. But ultimately, if you do get accepted into those programs, what it means is you get a lot of these natural capital outcomes that you want with less cash outlay, less cash flow impact. And so that's a great way actually for a lot of landowners who, really just want to keep the land in the family, have it not be super in the red every year, right? There's a lot of cost share programs that can help offset some of those costs, that also help improve some of your other natural capital outcomes. But really, for a lot of landowners in forested settings, understanding your timber value is going to be one of the big ones, and understanding, well, when is the right time to harvest my timber based on both the biological growth of those trees and also the market conditions and pricing, and all these other things that we're tracking at NCX.
I think you answered a bit of what Rob's next question was. He's asking, does the tool identify properties that may already be enrolled in a managed land type program? You see that he asked a question there, any type of subsidized program for forest management. Does your tool identify that? Because who knows, there might be a satellite owner and they may not be actively on the property, but they may own it and they're kind of more of a management position. What kind of information would they glean from those type of programs through your tool?
Sure. So right now we're not identifying which programs landowners are enrolled in. We do have database information or information regarding conservation easements if they're engaged in those, which restrict what can be done on a given acre. But for the federal programs, those conservation programs that Max was mentioning, oftentimes those are great opportunities for landowners, but the participants and which acres are currently enrolled or have been enrolled in the past, it's not public. So really it's geared more towards what's possible. If you're looking at this, I guess I'm guessing from the question that it's, if you're looking at a property for potential acquisition, then in those cases it would we would be able to perhaps see if it's enrolled in a conservation easement, not for government conservation program overall, like CSP or CRP. But even those, I believe are transferable when you purchase, or if you do purchase a property.
The tool does tell me, though, if if I'm interested in enrolling in one of these programs, your tool does identify what I would be eligible for.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we're taking all of the information about the land, and we're using that to clarify these programs could work for you, these programs won't. So yeah, we're sifting that list down from thousands to, I mean, in many cases, landowners have 50 or 100 plus, but even like bringing that down further once you clarify what your goals are, to say, yeah, I'd like to look at carbon. That's interesting to me. And with this forest forecast tool, you can compare what the carbon payment is likely to be over time to what you'd make otherwise if you were just harvesting to, with a balance of revenue and deer habitat in mind.
Yeah, that's very good. I think Mac and Rob both are asking a question. I think they want to use the tool from more of an investment type purpose of screening deals and looking, see what's available, comparing this one to this one. That's something that that a user can do, right? It's not specifically on the property that they currently own, but they can do this on basically every parcel that they want to look at. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, they can do that now. You would just edit and change which parcel it is that you're looking at, and it would recalculate for that. But that's if you're looking at properties, you see what price it is, and you wonder if the timber, managing the timber over a 10-year period could cover the cost of the land. You could use this tool to clarify that.
Wonderful.
Although I will say, like doing the point and click on that for tens or hundreds of properties, I'm sure we'll get old fast. So if you want to, feel free to shoot me an email at max@ncx.com if you want to talk about a little bit more sort of at scale way of doing this. I see a question in here about the is it worth it to do tree farm? As particularly in West Virginia where there's not chain of title mills. Zach, you have thoughts on that?
Oof. So most of what if I was forced to, I'd say yes. Usually because you get support on management and sort of management sort of management advice minimally. But the deal with tree farm is that it often gets you better mill access or like market access. That's not true for every wood basket. So it's we should probably add that as like a whether it whether it pays its way. But I say yes because most of the people that I know that are involved in that program are glad that they are. Those that I know that have discontinued their engagement in that program have done so because they've found it does not get them market uplift in their particular wood basket. So that's the nickel answer there, I guess.
There was another question that came in from Mark, and I mean, clearly it's going to be a question only you guys can answer. I don't think I can help out at all. But when your tool, when it's running this, does this take into account the activity going on the adjacent parcel? Mark asked a question: if he's surrounded by a utility solar project, right, where all the trees are coming down, does that impact his property score in your tool?
Not yet, no. So it won't for something like timber value. It would for something like habitat. So, and that's right now, the deer and turkey score are really focused on your property. That's not, as we begin to develop this further and add additional species, it will be we'll be considering the broad area around your property. And that's important because sometimes the mix of forest types that species benefit from would lead you to make different decisions on your property to get the right balance across the landscape, not just on your particular ownership. But for something like timber, your timber value, the adjacent, the decisions that an adjacent landowner have made tend not to affect what's allowed for you, except in some Western states where if somebody clear cuts their property, then it actually there can be green up requirements where you can't clear cut right next to it, which would create like what they consider too large of an opening.
Wonderful. There's another question came in here from Mac. Again, I think he's wanting to use the tool for reconnaissance reasons for investing. How would he use this tool to understand whether or not a property that he's looking at is priced fairly from a timber perspective?
Right. So if you were just like, you would select the property, you would select timber revenue only as your objective. And then you would look at the price that the amount that it says that you could make then that's maxed out. That's like managing as much and as hard as you can. And you would take the net present value, or you would adjust that for how long it takes for you to make that revenue, and you would compare that to the asking price. And you could think of that almost as like if you were going to buy an apartment complex, you would be looking at what are the rents going to pay over a long period of time to justify the asking price, where you're not, if you're not looking at it for any other sort of natural capital value or personal enjoyment value. So basically just look at the timber revenue box, choose to maximize that, and look to see if that is greater or less than the asking price.
Yeah, I would also chime in to say, like, I would not plunk down, $1 million on the just based on the forest forecast timber values right now. It's intended to just be a directional thing to help you understand sort of like, what could this forest look like? How should I think about some of the major trade-offs? But like, if you actually are like ultimately going to do a timber transaction, we would strongly recommend working with a local forester, doing a timber cruise. Those are all things that NCX can help you connect with local professionals to do that. But the forest forecast tool should be a great way to sort of do a high pass filter of like broadly, like thumbs up, thumbs down for this property. And of course, like lots of things are going to depend on the local markets too, and the product mix that's on the property. And yeah, I mean, these are all things where like once you're like, oh yeah, like this property makes sense, I would hit that, get a NCX consultation button.
Right. That's their next step, right, Max? If they get a high level screening through the tool, they still have questions, right? They click that contact NCX, they do a consultation with you guys, and they can really get into the weeds on it.
Exactly.
Wonderful. There's Wesley has a question. He said he's located in Rockford, Illinois, has 250 acres of red oak and 250 acres of veneer quality walnut, age 45 to 48 years old, and he needs to start thinning. He's saying, what is his next step, guys?
Very nice property. So right now, Forest Forecast is just available in the U.S. South. We're going to be expanding that further, but it sounds like you already know what you have and have an idea of what it is you'd like to do. So I think you could cut straight to schedule a consultation, and then you'll just be talking with an expert. They can look at your property specifically and talk with you about options for economically how that would look out in the near term and in the long term, to help make a decision of what the right next steps are going to be acre by acre for you.
Yeah, but I mean, ultimately for that property, it's going to boil down to a question of like, when do I harvest and what kind of products am I optimizing for? Right? I mean, like veneer walnut is like a special animal, but
yeah, that's some high value stuff. So yeah, it's
they need to talk to you. So that's Wesley. You need to click that button, or Michaela or Max, if you guys want to put your contact information in the chat, just so everybody has it there. Put your email, put your cell phone numbers, just so folks can reach out to you right away. Wesley, I'd highly recommend these are the two guys that you need to talk to. Yeah, like they said, it sounds like you have some highly valuable stuff there. You've been taking care of it. These are the experts that you should talk to. Mac asked another question. Thanks for all you guys really appreciate all the questions coming in. This is very helpful because if you have a question, I guarantee you everybody else on the call probably has a question as well. So this one comes into, and you guys cover the nuance on this a little bit. Is timber or carbon generally more profitable?
Timber is generally more profitable. The times that it is not more profitable the places that it's generally not more profitable are when you are and your forest is distant from mills, distant from the market that you could actually sell the timber, because it's heavy and cumbersome. The biggest value loss for timber landowners is in the transportation of logs to the mill. And so if you are, 80, 90, let's just say 70 plus miles from the market that you would send your pulp, chip and saw timber to, depending on the, like, this is not if we're talking about veneer walnut. That's again, totally different animal. If we're talking about just like you've got pine, you've got some oak on your southern property, by the time you get that far away from the mill, you're losing most of the value of the timber in the transportation costs. And that's when you start looking at the annuity payments that you would be getting from carbon for selling your harvest rights, to sell the right to harvest on your property for a period of time. And you can absolutely use this tool to kind of look and see what that does to the other things you care about. Maybe it's deer, maybe it's turkey, and to try and balance that for yourself. So you'll see how much you could make from the timber revenue. You'll know how much from looking at the programs, what you can make for the carbon, like annuity payment. And in many cases, when you're distant from the mill, carbon pays better a little bit. For most landowners, on a purely economic consideration, carbon does not pay as much as managing your land for timber right now. And those timber markets are in flux, carbon markets are in flux. And so that's part of what we want to be able to answer for landowners, and be able to give them kind of this longer term forecast to sort of know what they would be giving up if they sign over a 20-year agreement not to harvest. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and just to be very concrete about it, though, you can go on ncx.com to this forest forecast stuff, and the way to look at this for your property is click on just timber revenue as your goal, and just see it's like that's the revenue that you're potentially leaving on the table, and then look at those carbon annuity payments, or however the program you're looking at is structured, and just be like, okay, well, got these two numbers, like which one's the bigger number? Now, like Zach was saying, all this is predicated on just, if you are exclusively focused on the economics of the deal right now. If you don't want to, if you just love taking walks in the woods with your grandkids, right? Or you want to do hunt some turkey out there or something, right? Like you may have non-economic reasons to prefer to do the carbon program as opposed to the timber one, because you just want to keep the trees out there, and you value some of these other natural capital outcomes. In fact, like one of the things that Zach says all the time is the biggest purchaser of natural capital in the United States. It's not like these companies buying carbon credits and all that. It's landowners like you guys on this call that are managing your land for these natural capital outcomes, and often trading off against some of these cash flows that you could get if you were just exclusively optimizing for things like maximize the economic timber value on my property, and understanding those decisions, what you're actually leaving on the table, how to optimize, these natural capital values that you have, places like Craig, you were talking about, where there actually isn't a trade-off between these things. You can get some timber revenue and it increases your deer habitat, right? Those are the types of decisions we're trying to help landowners make with this forest forecast tool.
Wonderful. There's another question that came in, someone anonymous, kind of shifting gears a little bit over to cell phone towers, and it doesn't even have to cover cell phone towers, but really any type of other land use segments: solar, wind, battery storage, data centers, all of those different things. So in my rural property might be good for a cell phone tower. What type of information would a cell phone tower company need about their timber? And I'll touch really quick. We always get questions like this in all of these webinars of people, well, how do I get in front of these folks? That is one thing that LandApp does very, very well. So you can create your own listing completely free. There is no listing fee. There's no commission. There is no obligation to accept offers. If you're listening to this and you're wanting to say, okay, well, maybe I want to get my property out there for a potential solar farm or a battery storage site or a data center or an oil and gas lease, whatever it is, you can raise your hand. It goes into LandApp, which then feeds over into LandGate, where all of the developers of those types of resources are using that software, and they can see you raising your hand and you get out in front of those folks. So that's a quick plug there for LandApp. If you're wanting to get potential revenue from some of these other types of sources outside of what Max and Zach have been talking about here with timber and wildlife and things like that, and you step over into more of the energy realm, there, leverage LandApp for that. It is free of charge. But also on the carbon side, NCX, Max and Zach, they're leveraging the platform as well. So when people raise their hand and want to get into a carbon credit program, NCX sees that as well, and they'll reach out if they like that property. But what do you guys? I think that's another use case for your tool for all the folks listening here. Again, you're providing this information free of charge, essentially, to landowners. So the more information you have to any type of potential developer, no matter what it is, it's going to be a leg up for you guys. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's all true. And like you said, I think LandApp is a great place to start for energy related things like data centers and solar installations and things like that. At NCX, I mean, it's in the name, right? We're very focused on the natural capital side of all this, which is why the tool is called Forest Forecast and not cell phone tower forecast. Yeah, for now, right? Like that's so. But I just for expectation management with people on this call, right? Like I would say NCX is a great place to go if you got trees and you're trying to figure out what are my woods, right? Like that's what this webinar is about. That's what we're very focused on here at NCX, because the trees grow over time. It's not a wall of green that you have out there. It's not static. The decisions that you make today about your forest do affect what future generations on your land will experience, and those are the decisions that we're really focused on helping landowners navigate today.
Wonderful. And I think we'll try to get through these last couple ones here. Mark's giving you guys some good information, some good ideas of continued development on your tool. I think here he's saying, what about the evaluation of erosion and contamination due to, again, I think he has a utility solar project right next to him. Sounds to me like that's something that you guys are probably in continuous work right now, and you'll start folding those things in so that offset impacts will start impacting whatever's going on across the fence line will start impacting your evaluations moving forward, right?
Certainly, yeah. So especially when it comes to something like erosion, those are things we're concerned with and want to make sure landowners have good information about. So short answer is yes. You're going to see development of this. I mean, geographic expansion, beyond the U.S. South, sort of, and truly, thank you all for the questions. Like it's helping kind of get us pointed in the right direction about what it is that you would want to see and what would be helpful to you. So I hear you on that, and we'll be cranking things out over the coming year.
Wonderful. Okay, last one here, guys, is coming in from Bond again. Does the app help identify land that is subject to the Clean Water Act regulations or the US ACE jurisdiction?
So for forest operations, as we right now with the recommendations that are coming up, it's not taking into account all of those within a state might get rolled up in something called BMPs, best management practices. Certainly in riparian zones, there are restrictions about how you can operate. Those are taken into account once you're doing sort of the free consultation thing. We're going to be looking specifically at that and seeing if there's any elements that need to be accounted for, primarily because they're sometimes hairy sort of challenges in determining what stream order is and so what's actually applicable. That'll be integrated more automatically probably in the coming quarter or two. But again, short answer is yes, because it impacts what is possible for landowners, and we want to take all of that complexity and just make this thing the easy button for you so you can know what you can do, where you can do it to get what you want.
And that's a powerful thing. I'm sure everybody who's listening understands that they're essentially getting a very seasoned forester private consultation on their property by just simply going to ncx.com, clicking on the property. But then you guys are opening the door to them if they need some further consultations, they need to speak with, you, Max, or Zach. They click the button and they're talking with you guys. I mean, that's a incredibly powerful resource for everybody listening. So go ahead, Zach.
Oh no, ultimately we want to help landowners accomplish their goals and move beyond that wall of green to where they're acting, they're making decisions and acting confidently on their property. And we're here to help at every step of the way. This forest forecast is really, it's to give you an idea of what's possible. And then we can get down to the brass tacks of how do you do it? And then we're doing it together. So yeah, would be glad to work with any of the folks that that have questions about what they can do and help them get it done.
Wonderful. Well, both of you guys, wonderful job. Did a tremendous job of presenting the product and the value and the use case for everybody here. So great job there. Again, thank you guys for joining. Thanks everyone who stayed with us throughout the whole time. It looks like everybody stayed on. So it was a good topic and very engaging. Appreciate all of the questions. Again, if you have any more questions about it, ncx.com. You can see Max and Zach, they have their emails there in the chat. And you will be getting a follow-up, like I said at the start of the call. This has been recorded. You'll get a recording of this webinar, and you'll also be getting the slides that Max was presenting there. So again, thank you for your time. You all have a wonderful rest of the week. Max and Zach, great job, guys, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.